everyone, Angela here. Welcome to my channel. I just wanted to say thank you for everyone that watches my videos. I really appreciate it. And I thought today we could talk a little bit about the ego and the shadow. And some people think that they're both the same thing. I kind of see them as a little bit different, kind of two different aspects of the same thing. So the ego attachment is what joins with our soul when we come into our human body, and the purpose for the ego is to provide the contrast in the duality experience. Like, we are presently in a duality consciousness, which is everything is yes, no, white, black, up, down, in, out. Everything has an opposite. And that's not typically what we're used to. When we're souls in the soul world, there is no contrast at all. There's no duality at all. Everything is perfect peace and love all the time. And so we choose to come down into these contrasted experiences so that we can learn more about ourselves as souls. Source can learn more about itself. It's this whole game of expanding consciousness and creating and just having fun. Like, we do this stuff for fun. We think that this stuff is fun. We think it's hilarious. And we do it often. So the ego in itself is not the problem. The ego is a necessary part of the journey, not only because it provides the contrast, but because it protects us. It helps us decide what's good for us, bad for us, safe and unsafe. And that's kind of its primary goal, is to keep us alive. If we didn't have an ego, we wouldn't have the judgment or like the ability to be like, oh, this is a dangerous situation, you know. So we need the ego, and it's part of the experience here. It only becomes a problem when we are not in balance with our spirit and our ego. If the ego's running the show and we're unconscious sleeping, then we're going to create all kinds of problems for ourselves, and that's part of the reason. I mean, we do that on purpose so we can learn stuff. But if we don't come to a place where we find balance with our ego, it gets us into all kinds of situations. It hurts us, it hurts others, and makes us really miserable a lot of the times. Our ego is the part of us that searches for gratification and service to self, and it's all about me, me, me. The ego is all about me, what I want, what I need. And the spirit's not like that. The spirit is very detached, compassionate, and lovingly observing. So you can kind of tell when you're in ego or spirit by the way that you react to certain people and situations. If you're coming from a place of detached compassion, you're probably operating from spirit. If you're coming from a place of anger, service to self, hatred, bitterness, any of that, fear, then you're in ego. So I think that we need to not push the ego away, not resist the ego or try to detach from the ego. Some people say when we suffer spiritual awakening that we suffer the death of the ego, and that's true in the sense, but really the ego doesn't die. We just awaken to the perspective of what the ego is and how it works in our lives. And so once we become awakened, we don't have an excuse anymore to be acting like that anymore. Once we become awakened and we gain the perspective, the bird's eye view of the situation, and understanding the hows and whys of it all, then we no longer have an excuse to behave in the same way that the people that are sleeping are behaving. They don't know. They are asleep. They are unconsciously driving the car, and they have no idea that that's what they're doing. So they have an excuse for being the way that they are. But once we experience our awakening, a big part of that process is shadow work, and this is when we come into the shadow part of the ego, which is the bad side of everything. The bad. Technically, there is no good and bad. It's all about learning and the experience. It's the ego that decides what's good and bad. But the shadow work is necessary when we start to gain these perspectives. Then we have a responsibility to go inside and to take an honest look at ourselves and see where we could do better, how we could behave better, how we could treat people better, how we could treat ourselves better is a huge one. Because once we start caring for ourselves and healing ourselves, we're automatically going to affect other people differently. Everything is going to start to change when you're not acting out of that wounding anymore. So that's a big part of it. And that's why shadow work is so necessary. And you know when your shadow is at play. You know what you do and how you act, and it's those things that you aren't proud of. Those shameful, embarrassing, humiliating things that you do to yourself when you're reacting emotionally in an unhealthy, unbalanced way. So when we awaken, we have a responsibility to balance the shadow and the spirit. And that's really what we should be primarily focused on, because we really can't do anything else until we're in balance ourselves. We have to balance the masculine, the feminine. We have to balance the ego and the spirit. We have to balance compassion and fear, tolerance. So it's all a balancing act once you're awakened. But once you get into sync with how to balance things, it comes quite naturally, and it's not that difficult to do. It just requires a little cognitive changing in the way that you think, and a little bit more healthy emotional responses to things and people. And so when we start doing shadow work, we start to be really self-aware of what our negative characteristics are, and we take an honest look at those, and we find the wounding that they come from, because it always comes from wounding. We heal those wounds, and then we're able to balance again. When we heal enough of our wounded ego, we can start to come in balance with our spirit. And every time we heal a wound, it clears space for more of our soul to come into our body. When our souls right now are only little fractions in these bodies, because if our entire soul was to fit in our body, we would blow up. It's way too much energy. So we have to fractal down to these tiny streams of consciousness to fit in these tiny little delicate human vessels and play out these roles and learn these lessons, and we do it for fun. So let's make it fun. Once you start consciously creating, you can make it fun. It's when we're unconsciously creating and we're creating all these bad situations for ourselves that we're having a miserable time. That's when we are suffering. That's when we are suicidal. That's when we are depressed. That's when we have anxiety. When we are not fully healed. But the more you heal, the more of your soul comes into your body, and the more in alignment you get with your higher self and your soul. And the more into alignment you get, the more things on the outside of your life start to really calm down and become silent, and the mind settles down, and the spirit settles down, and the body settles down, and peace is available. And once you learn what the vibration of love and peace feels like, you won't want to be in any other vibration. You certainly won't want to sink back down into a third dimensional ego wounded vibration. So we need to do the shadow work once we've awakened, and we need to come in balance with ourselves, and that means when you're saying something nasty on a post, you need to look at yourself and ask yourself why you're behaving that way. When you're treating somebody that you love like crap, you need to be aware. It's about self-awareness. It's about being cognizant of what you're doing, thinking, and really paying attention to how you're making other people feel, how other people make you feel, and that entire energy exchange. And I think it's really funny because people will jump off cliffs with nothing but a parachute on their back, 10,000 feet to the ground, and it doesn't faze them. But you put emotional pain in front of somebody and they're screaming and crying like a baby. Like, people cannot. People are so afraid of their own emotions. People are so afraid of their own pain. People are afraid of their own pain, and so they'll do anything to avoid it. Anything to avoid facing it, when all you have to do is face it. It's that simple. Face it, heal it, it's gone forever, and you're a healthier person. Why is that so hard for some people? I don't know. But some people will fight that to the death. So, yeah, so I think that's something that we should try and be conscious about when we're acting out of ego or shadow, and when we're acting out of spirit. And we should always try and be in alignment with our spirit, and not resist the ego, but balance the ego. You want to accept and embrace everything. You don't want to resist anything, any part of yourself at all. Anything that happens to you. I mean, really, enlightenment is about embracing and accepting everything with compassionate love and tolerance. That's what it means to be enlightened, and that is how you get to a blissful existence. Heal it, balance it, get into alignment with it. It really is that simple, but it's something that you have to be self-aware about, and it's something that you have to be cognizant about, and it's something that you have to pay attention to. So yeah, so let's all make sure that we're keeping up on our shadow work and making this experience more pleasant for ourselves and everyone. So thanks for stopping by, guys. Bye.